you can engage in shaming types of behavior for someone who has transgressed certain cultural boundaries and not even, you're not consciously aware of, oh, this person is not appropriately behaving in our cultural norms, so I must, provide corrective action. Right, if we think of, someone who, let's say at a funeral, and somebody starts laughing at a funeral. Sometimes laughter at funerals can be acceptable in certain situations, but in general, funerals are times more of sadness, mourning, and so here someone who's inappropriately laughing at a funeral. Well, one of the ways that inappropriate, quote-unquote, behavior is policed is, people giving them looks of disapproval, frowning, maybe a clearing of the throat to kind of suggest, that now's not the time to be laughing, or such behavior is inappropriate. The people that are doing that are probably doing it automatically, as opposed to thinking, oh, well, this person has transgressed the cultural rules of behavior in funeral types of situations where people should be exhibiting sadness and mourning, and they are exhibiting mirth. And so therefore, I must engage in certain behaviors that encourages this person to align their actions with the standards of society. And so I will now put a disapproving face, now I will make a disapproving facial expression as a means of policing that inappropriate behavior. Right? Well, no, people don't think that, right? They just respond, and that's one of the ways, of course, that culture works in such a way that we are not conscious of culture because we have so learned those norms, those ideas, those values, those rules, that we internalize them to such an extent that we are able to engage in such policing because we have internalized them so much and we're not even aware of what we're doing. Culture, of course, also includes products. So we have these kind of mental constructs, values, ideas. We have physical actions, behaviors, but then we also have objects within a culture, often a lot of them connected with the more emotional sides of human life rather than the cognitive side. Cultural products could be a variety of things. Media might be a way of thinking about it. These are things that we've produced in our culture, and of course, the products can be used to reinforce culture, reinforce certain aspects of culture, but products can also be used to transform or transgress culture. So, for example, an American flag is a cultural product. It is something that has been constructed, developed, to express certain elements or certain ideas or certain values. There is nothing innate in the flag that carries those ideas or values, but these are things that, right, this cloth or paper, whatever element, but this blue field of 50 white stars, these 13 stripes of cloth with some of them red, some of them white. Right? There's nothing innate in there that says anything about a certain region of the world. There's nothing innate in there that says anything about certain values of what it means to be a United States citizen. Doesn't say really any. I mean, it does reflect our history in a sense of the number of states reflecting the number of stars, but even that is nothing innate in a star that says state, right? Or in those stripes that suggests colonies, the original 13 colonies. but it is how we have imbued those symbols and the entire symbol of the flag, right, that it is imbued with those ideas and values so that when someone sees a flag or salutes the flag or says the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag, all of that is tied up with culture. Right? And so we kind of imbue that object with those elements because, you know, this is a cultural product. And so the flag, even though there's nothing innate in the flag itself, because we've imbued it with these ideas and values, and that we expect certain behaviors, right? That when the flag is raised and the national anthem is played, right? You stand respectfully. You take off your hat. If you're male, you place your hand over your heart. If you're in uniform, you salute. And the recent issues in the NFL over certain people not standing but kneeling, you know, these were things that a lot of people were upset about because these were actions that in behaviors that transgressed culture when everybody knows, quote unquote, you should stand and salute and honor the flag. Well, again, it's a cultural product that is imbued with those things. There's nothing innate in flags or cloth or stars or the particular colors that suggest these things, but then they also reinforce those things. So we've imbued them with the ideas and values of what it means to be American, what it means to be a United States citizen. And so we've placed that on this symbol, but then also when we see this symbol, it reinforces for us, a lot of people, those ideas and values. Right? The heart swells with the greatness of the United States, or I feel great gratitude for the history of our country and the people that have fought in its various wars. Right? So we're kind of we've imbued the symbol, but then the symbol, the product, then also reinforces some of those ideas and values and calls to remembrance or calls to an action of those values and ideas. And all of this, of course, is tied up with a particular community, right, a society. That culture, while there are certain, you know, things that cross cultures, in many respects what we're talking about is how a society, how a community is organized. Or, you know, we can get smaller than that, a religion, a congregation, a university. All of these can exhibit these cultural categories and components. But they shape how we exist in a society. And so even though, excuse me, even though we might see some cross-cultural expressions, similarities, right, people aren't going to behave exactly the same way in Great Britain, for example, when they see their flag and hear God Save the Queen played. But they might feel similar types of things, like nationalistic pride, respect, honor for previous generations, but they're going to express that differently in different ways because their society is organized differently than the society of the United States. And so culture, of course, you know, is a way in which groups, societies, make sense of who they are, often in contrast to others, whether that's kind of an intentional us versus them type of idea, or just kind of a who are we? What does it mean to be a United States citizen? What does it mean to be a Christian? What does it mean to be a particular group of Christians? What does it mean to be part of this baseball team? Right? There's other ways in which we think of group dynamics that can reflect some of these categories. And of course, it's important to recognize that cultures are different. There is cultural diversity. Some of those are obvious types of differences in the language. That would be an immediate way. The physical items of a culture, relationship with others, lifestyle, that would include manners of dress, that would include organization of the day. What are the most important elements of that culture? All of these kind of things are a part of the ways in which cultures are diverse. Even down to the point of how you gesture to someone and what gestures are appropriate, what gestures are inappropriate, and how you call attention to someone. The waving hi to someone. Well, that might not have the same types of meanings across culture. Even things like personal space. How much personal space do you give someone when you're talking to them? With some cultures suggesting, there should be respect their distance, right? Sometimes a greater distance. Other cultures, right? It's more about closeness, and so you stand closer to someone, especially if you deeply engaged in conversation with them. So personal space suggests the ways in which cultures are different. So all of these elements are ways in which cultures are different, and all of those have to be learned, or perhaps relearned if you join another culture, right? And of course that can, the ways in which either a citizen of the United States decides to live in France, or whether someone from Italy decides to immigrate to the United States, become a United States citizen. These are things you have to learn, right, or relearn, at least to the point of getting along in culture, right? And so you might hold on to certain values of your particular culture you grew up in, but you recognize that, well, personal space is going to be different in this particular area. I'm going to have to learn a different language. Right? The lifestyle might be different in that, what meals do you have and when? How I interact with the people around me. If you think of even, we make distinctions between northern United States, southern United States, where the relationship with others is, in the South, we might say, you're expected to kind of say hi to everybody, expected to engage in deeper conversations, and in the North, you might ignore others more often instead of really saying hi to everybody or interacting with people that you meet on the street. And so, all of those kind of things are things that you either have to learn or unlearn as you move between cultures, if that is something that, that happens to someone. Now, in some respect, this kind of cultural diversity isn't necessarily anything more than a difficulty if you move between cultures, right? Okay, I have to learn another language, but, right, language is not necessary. There's nothing innately good or right about one's home language versus the language of the country that one moves to, right? There's nothing innately good about English. In fact, people that learn English have to learn English as a second language might suggest that there's actually some evil things, right, when you have to learn all the rules and all the exceptions. Seriously, though, language, there's nothing innate good or bad about that. There's nothing innately good or bad about certain gestures, but only what a culture has, imbued, right? That there are certain gestures that if you make them in the United States, right? If you do something to someone, right? You make a gesture toward them, that you have done something offensive, something vulgar. There is nothing innate in that gesture that is vulgar or offensive, right? Within reason. I mean, certainly, I guess there are some gestures that might be universal, and we say, okay, to show someone your backside might be a universal sign of disrespect. But there are other gestures that only have meaning in a sense of vulgar way because they have been interpreted that way and it's learned to be that way, where in other cultures that might not necessarily be something that's offensive. So certain aspects of cultural diversity are, there's nothing innately good or bad about it, except as how a culture interprets it. Other aspects, though, when we're thinking about how, there are important truths, when we come to something like religion, which religion is a cultural component, and how one engages in, how one lives in culture is often influenced by particular religions. But I would still argue, from a theological standpoint, that that's where there are elements of universality that are greater. When it comes to Christianity, for example, and we think of the diverse cultures that Christianity is present in, there are certain elements where if there's diversity, it's not a bad thing, right? So thinking about, let's say, the worship songs that are sung by Christians. Now, while there would probably be some songs that would be found in a wide variety of Christian expressions and cultures because of missionary work, right? So you might sing something like Amazing Grace, right? In the United States, you might find it if you went to a church in Brazil, one in Africa, if you were in a house church in China, if you were in a particular church in Russia, right? You're going to find Amazing Grace, right? It's that powerful of a song, and because of missionary work, is spread throughout the world. But there might be other songs that we sing in the United States that are not sung in other places, and there might be some songs that are indigenously developed in other places that we wouldn't necessarily sing in the United States because they wouldn't be in our language. They might not be known, right? And so there might be diversity of songs. That's not a bad thing because worldwide we are praising God, and as long as it's praising God in appropriate ways, and the words that are being said are sound doctrine, then just because it's expressed in a different way, in a different melody, in a different rhythm, that's something that we'd say, it's God accepts that if it's done in spirit and in truth, even though it might not be the type of song that I would sing, but as a member of the United States, as a Christian in the United States. But certainly there are other things that we'd say have to be universals, right? Things like what we talked about with respect to Jesus. There would be other universals, other universals that we would say have to be present, have to be held, have to be believed across the board. That there are areas where it doesn't matter that our cultures are diverse, you still have to believe that Jesus is the Son of God. It doesn't matter whether you're in Africa, it doesn't matter whether you're in Western Europe, it doesn't matter if you're in Montgomery, Alabama. There would be some elements we would say should not be diverse across Christians, no matter what kind of country or civilization they live in.